Night had fallen over the abandoned school parking lot, the asphalt cold and indifferent. A maintenance crew's drill met a hollow, and the earth answered with a sound like a muted scream. Suddenly, decades of silence felt fragile, as if a vanished afternoon. A yellow bus and 30 small lives were pressing to be remembered. Welcome to Missing Shadows, the channel that uncovers the forgotten, the vanished, and the untold. Hit subscribe, because every shadow hides a story. Evelyn Carter sat at her desk in the small newsroom of the Stonebrook Gazette, the glow of her computer screen reflecting in tired eyes. At 47, she carried herself with the quiet steadiness of someone who had seen enough life to know its weight, but not enough to shake its questions. Her colleagues called her dedicated, stubborn even, but in private moments. Evelyn knew it was something else that drove her, something she had never been able to put to rest. She was a journalist by trade, though in a town as small as Stonebrook, that meant covering everything from ribbon cuttings to high school football scores. Yet, tucked away in the back of her mind, she always carried an unease, a gnawing curiosity about the mysteries that had once gripped her hometown. The biggest one, the story whispered like a ghost in Stonebrook for decades, was the school bus that vanished in 1978. Evelyn had been just a child back then, too young to remember the faces, but old enough to recall the hushed tones, the uneasy glances between adults. The way her mother would change the subject whenever the word bus came up. That memory had followed her, shaping her career choices, pushing her toward the comfort of questions that could be answered until now. Her personal life, by comparison, was less defined. Divorced 5 years, she lived alone in a modest house on the edge of town. Her daughter away at college, her evenings often filled with old case files rather than conversation. Friends said she buried herself in her work because it was easier than confronting loneliness. Evelyn never corrected them. When news broke that a construction crew had unearthed something unusual beneath the parking lot where the old middle school once stood, Evelyn felt her chest tighten. She knew, before the police reports, before the speculation, that the past was about to claw its way into the present. And deep down, she knew she wouldn't be able to look away. For Evelyn Carter, the fracture point of her life had always been tied to a yellow school bus and the silence it left behind. She was only a child when it happened, 7 years old. Living just 3 streets over from where the middle school stood in 1978, it was an ordinary October morning, brisk air. The smell of wet leaves, the sound of sneakers on gravel. The kind of day no one thinks will scar a town forever. That afternoon, the bus never came home. 30 children, 2 teachers, and the driver were swallowed into mystery. At first, the adults in Evelyn's world pretended it was a mistake, a mechanical failure, maybe even a runaway prank. But within hours, the tone shifted. Parents wept on lawns. Police cars tore down the main road. Evelyn remembered standing at her bedroom window, watching her mother smoke 3 cigarettes in a row. A tremor in her hands she never explained. Evelyn hadn't lost a sibling to that bus, but she had lost something else: trust. Her best friend at the time, a girl named Laura Jacobs, had been on board. They had shared peanut butter sandwiches, secrets whispered under the monkey bars, promises about growing up side by side. And then, nothing. Laura vanished, leaving Evelyn with the sharp, confusing grief of a child who couldn't understand why someone so alive could suddenly be gone. The town never recovered. Some families moved away. Others stayed, wearing their grief like a permanent shadow. Rumors flourished that the bus had been hijacked, that it had been driven into the quarry. that something darker had happened that no one dared say out loud. For Evelyn, the unanswered questions became a constant hum in the back of her mind. Even as the years went on, as she became a teenager, then a college student, then a wife and mother, the echo of that hollow silence followed her. It was the silence that shaped her career. Journalism became a way to probe at the void, to demand answers where others accepted confusion. Yet no matter how many stories she wrote, no matter how many truths she uncovered, the one truth she wanted most, what happened to Laura? What happened to that bus remained locked away. Her marriage cracked under the weight of that obsession. Her ex-husband once told her, during their last fight, "You don't live here, Evelyn. You live in the past." At the time, she had no response, because he wasn't wrong. She could never shake the image of Laura's empty desk at school. The way her teacher had paused mid-roll call for weeks, her voice catching before skipping over the name. Even now, decades later, Evelyn's sleep was punctured by dreams. She would see Laura's hair ribbon fluttering in the wind, hear the squeak of bus brakes, smell exhaust fumes, and then silence again. The same silence that had stolen her childhood. So, when the call came about, the construction crew striking metal under the parking lot, Evelyn's first thought wasn't about the scoop. It wasn't about her career or her reputation. It was Laura, always Laura, because for Evelyn, the bus wasn't just a story. It was the wound that had never healed, and she knew if this discovery led to answers, she would either finally find peace or shatter completely. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon, just as Evelyn Carter was sorting through a pile of local event notices. Bake sales, charity runs, school concerts. The phone buzzed, and she almost let it go to voicemail. But something in her chest, that old tug she had come to recognize, made her reach for it. "Evelyn, it's Tom Reynolds. You might want to get down here." Tom was no stranger. He had worked construction in Stonebrook for years, a steady figure in the background of the town's constant attempts to modernize. His voice now, though, carried an edge she had never heard before, taut, careful, like someone balancing between disbelief and dread. "Where's here?" Evelyn asked. "The old middle school lot, near where they're breaking ground for the new shopping center. You should see this for yourself." By the time Evelyn pulled her car up to the site, police tape was already fluttering in the autumn wind. Construction machinery loomed over a half-dug pit, their lights casting stark beams into the late afternoon shadows. Workers stood in clusters, their faces pale, avoiding eye contact as if afraid the ground itself might accuse them. Tom met her near the edge of the lot. His hard hat hung loosely in his hand, his expression a mix of confusion and horror. "We hit something metal," he said. "Thought it was a septic tank at first." But then, his voice trailed off. Evelyn followed his gaze down into the pit. There, half exposed beneath layers of dirt and cracked asphalt, was the unmistakable curve of yellow paint. Rust had eaten away at much of it, but the shape was undeniable. It was a bus. For a moment, Evelyn couldn't breathe. Her mind reeled backward to Laura's laugh, to the way the town's children had whispered about monsters in the woods, to the silence that had swallowed her best friend whole. Her knees threatened to buckle, and she gripped the edge of the barrier to steady herself. A uniformed officer approached, clipboard in hand. "Ma'am, you need to step back. This is an active scene." Evelyn's press badge was already out, trembling in her hand. Evelyn Carter Gazette. "I've been covering this town longer than most people in this crowd have lived in it. You're telling me that's what I think it is?" The officer hesitated, then gave a tight nod. "We won't know until the excavation team finishes, but yes, it appears to be a school bus." The words hit her like a physical blow. "Appear to be," as if there was any doubt. Evelyn could feel the world narrowing to the sound of her own heartbeat. The bus had been here all along, buried beneath years of pavement and casual footsteps, hidden in plain sight while the town pretended to move on. But why here, and why now? As the crowd grew, neighbors, reporters from out of town, even former students who had long since left Stonebrook, Evelyn caught sight of something that made her chest seize on the ground. Just beyond the perimeter lay a small object that had been unearthed with the soil. It was dirty, rusted at the edges, but unmistakable. A metal hair clip. Blue enamel, Laura's favorite color. Evelyn picked it up with trembling fingers, ignoring the shouts from officers telling her not to touch evidence. For a brief second, she swore she felt warmth in it, as though it had been waiting for her hand all these years. Her throat tightened. This wasn't just a discovery. This was a summons. Something or someone wanted the past unearthed. And Evelyn knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that she was not just here to report the story. She was part of it. The shadows of 1978 had come crawling back into the light, and they had chosen her. The morning after the discovery, Stonebrook buzzed like a hive struck with a stick. For the first time in decades, the name of the town appeared on national headlines. Reporters crowded the site, satellite trucks lined the main road, and locals who had never spoken about 1978 suddenly had theories they were eager to share. For Evelyn, the noise was overwhelming, but the pull was undeniable. She sat at her kitchen table, the hair clip placed carefully in front of her, a relic she hadn't turned over to police yet. She knew she should. Every instinct as a journalist told her evidence belonged in official hands, but every instinct as Laura's friend told her to keep it close. By mid-morning, she was back at the lot, notebook in hand. Excavators had carefully lifted the bus halfway out of the ground, mud clinging to its windows like dried tears. The sight of it stopped Evelyn in her tracks. It wasn't just a bus, it was a coffin, a time capsule, a silent witness finally dragged into daylight. "Ms. Carter." The voice came from behind her. She turned to find Detective Marcus Hale, recently assigned to the Stonebrook Police Department. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a reputation for being unflinching, he looked every bit the outsider he was. Evelyn had heard whispers he'd transferred from Chicago after a messy internal investigation. The locals didn't trust him yet, but Evelyn suspected that might work in his favor. He wasn't weighed down by the town's collective silence. "You were close to one of the children, weren't you?" Hale asked, his tone carefully neutral. "Laura Jacobs," Evelyn said quietly. "She was my best friend." Hale studied her a moment longer, as though measuring how much weight her words carried. "Then you'll understand why I need you to tread carefully. This case isn't just old, it's delicate, and now it's under every spotlight in the country." "I've waited my whole life for this," Evelyn replied, surprising herself with the edge in her voice. "So don't tell me to tread carefully, detective. Tell me what you found." He didn't answer directly, but the silence told her enough. The police were still fumbling in the dark. Later that day, Evelyn visited the town archives, a cramped basement room beneath the library where dust had settled thicker than history itself. She pulled files, newspaper clippings, yearbooks. Every page felt like a breadcrumb scattered by ghosts. In one old article, she noticed a detail she had never caught before. The bus driver, Henry Lowell, had no surviving relatives listed. That struck her as strange. Everyone had someone as she dug deeper. The librarian, Mrs. Quinn, shuffled over with her cane. "You shouldn't stir this up, Evelyn," she whispered. "People buried that bus for a reason." Evelyn froze. "What did you say?" But Mrs. Quinn only shook her head, eyes glassy, and shuffled away. That night, Evelyn sat alone in her living room, notes scattered across the coffee table. The hair clip glinted in the lamplight. She picked it up, brushing dirt from its enamel surface, and felt that same strange warmth again. Maybe it was her imagination. Maybe it was exhaustion. But for a fleeting second, she thought she heard Laura's laughter faint, echoing as if carried from another room. Her phone buzzed, startling her. A blocked number. When she answered, the line was silent. Then, in a voice so faint she almost thought it was static, came the words, "Don't dig." The call cut off. Evelyn sat frozen, the phone still pressed to her ear. Goosebumps crawled across her arms. Whether it was a cruel prank or something else entirely, it didn't matter. The message was clear. She was not welcome in the past she was chasing. But for Evelyn, that only deepened the need. By midnight, she had decided she wouldn't stop. She couldn't. Laura's face hovered in her memory, that innocent smile frozen in time. And Evelyn knew every lie, every silence, every shadow in Stonebrook was about to be tested. The bus had been found. The truth would follow. And if someone wanted to stop her, they'd have to step out of the shadows themselves. 3 days after the discovery, the bus was finally lifted free from the earth. Rust peeled from its surface like skin, windows shattered long ago, its frame groaning as if reluctant to leave its grave. A crowd gathered behind the barricades, breaths caught in unison. Evelyn stood at the front, pen forgotten, notebook hanging useless at her side. The air was heavy with expectation. Everyone waited for the same thing, Bodhi's. But when the doors creaked open, what lay inside sent a ripple of disbelief through the crowd. The seats were intact, but empty. No bones, no remains. Nothing but rotted upholstery, a few scraps of fabric, and dust. 30 children, 2 teachers, a driver, gone. As if they had simply stepped off the bus before it was buried. Evelyn's heart slammed against her ribs. This wasn't possible. For decades, the prevailing theory had been that the bus and everyone inside it had been swallowed whole by the earth. But here it was, hollow, mocking the grief it had left behind. Detective Hale stepped inside first, flashlight sweeping over every surface. After a long silence, he climbed back down, face unreadable. "There's no sign of human remains," he announced. "None." The crowd erupted. Some gasped, some shouted, some wept. A woman cried out, "Then where are they?" The question hung in the air, unanswerable, heavier than any coffin could have been. Evelyn's fingers trembled as she clutched Laura's hair clip in her pocket. If Laura hadn't died on that bus, then where had she gone? That night, Hale called her into the station. He shut the blinds, lowered his voice. "We found something," he said, sliding a folder across the table. Inside were photographs taken during the excavation. One image showed the bus's undercarriage, rusted but intact. Another showed something far more chilling. A carved message etched into the metal floor beneath. "The last row of seats. We were here." Evelyn's throat tightened. She stared at the words until the letters blurred. They weren't random scratches. They were deliberate, desperate. Proof that the passengers had once been there. Could kids have done that? She asked, voice barely above a whisper. Hale shook his head. Maybe, but here's what doesn't make sense. The etching looks fresh. Not 47 years old. Evelyn's stomach flipped. That's impossible, or, Hale said, meeting her eyes. Someone's been here since the thought was worse than death. If the children had left the bus alive, had they been taken, hidden? And if someone had returned, why leave a message now? As Evelyn drove home through the darkened streets of Stonebrook, memories clawed at her. Laura's laughter, the way she had waved from the bus window that last day, blue hair clip gleaming in her hair. Evelyn had waved back, never imagining it would be the last time. But what if it wasn't the last? Her headlights swept over her front porch and froze. There, resting on the step, was a folded piece of paper weighed down by a stone. Heart hammering, Evelyn climbed out and snatched it up. The handwriting on the outside made her blood run cold. For Evelyn. Inside, scrawled in shaky ink, were 3 words. We never left. The note slipped from her fingers. For a long moment, she couldn't move, couldn't think. The handwriting looked achingly familiar. The loops and curves resembling notes Laura used to pass her in class. But that was impossible, or was it? Evelyn sank onto the porch steps, tears stinging her eyes. For 47 years, she had lived with the certainty that Laura was gone. Now the certainty was gone, too. The bus wasn't a coffin. It was a breadcrumb, and someone, maybe Laura, maybe someone else had just left her the next one. Everything Evelyn thought she knew about that. October Day in 1978 shattered. The past wasn't buried. It was alive, and it had just knocked on her door. Evelyn Carter had spent weeks chasing shadows, but nothing compared to the storm building inside her now. The note lay on the table in front of her, its 3 words etched into her mind. We never left. She hadn't shown it to Detective Hale, hadn't told anyone. Some instinct, or perhaps fear, told her this was meant for her alone. That night, a second message came. This time, slipped beneath a windshield wiper at the Gazette office. Come to the quarry. Midnight. Every sensible part of her screamed not to go, but Evelyn knew she would. She had spent her entire life waiting for answers, and if this was the only chance, she would take it, even if it meant walking straight into danger. The quarry loomed like a wound in the earth, its walls jagged, its depths echoing with old rumors. She parked at the edge, heart thundering. The night was cold, the wind sharp, and the beam of her flashlight shook in her hand. Evelyn. The voice came from the darkness. She spun, light cutting across stone until it landed on a figure stepping forward. Her breath caught. It was Laura Jacobs. Older, yes, but unmistakable. The same eyes, the same slight tilt of her head. Lines carved her face, her hair streaked with grey, but Evelyn would have known her anywhere. For a moment, the world tilted, impossible and undeniable all at once. Laura. Evelyn's voice cracked. Laura's eyes glistened. You shouldn't have come. The flashlight trembled in Evelyn's grip. Where have you been? What happened that day? Why didn't you come back? Laura shook her head, tears spilling freely now. We couldn't. They wouldn't let us. Who? Evelyn demanded, stepping closer. Laura, who wouldn't let you. Before Laura could answer, movement flickered at the edge of the quarry. Figures emerged from the shadows. Men and women, some familiar, some not, their faces carved with years of silence. Evelyn recognized the librarian, Mrs. Quinn, a former mayor, even Tom Reynolds, the construction foreman who had first called her. Her stomach dropped. It wasn't strangers. It was the town all along. Stonebrook had been hiding something, hiding them. Laura's voice was a whisper. They buried the bus to bury us. We were taken, chosen. Some escaped, most didn't. I've been waiting all these years for someone to dig us back up. Evelyn's knees buckled. Rage, grief, and disbelief collided inside her. Chosen for what? How could you stay silent? Laura reached for her hand, desperation in her touch, because silence was survival. But you can end it. Behind them, the crowd pressed closer. Evelyn saw no kindness in their eyes, only fear of exposure, fear of truth. One of the figures spoke, Mrs. Quinn, her cane steady now, her voice cold. Leave it alone, Evelyn. Some shadows are safer left untouched. You publish, you ruin lives. You destroy what little peace this town has left. Evelyn looked at Laura, at the friend she had mourned for 47 years, and realized the choice before her. To walk away, protect herself, and let the town's silence continue, or to fight and risk everything, even her life, to drag the truth into the light. Her throat tightened. For a moment, she thought of her daughter away at college, of the quiet life she could retreat to. But then she thought of 7-year-old Evelyn waving goodbye to Laura for the last time. She thought of 30 missing children whose voices had been silenced. She lifted her chin, voice steady despite the quake in her chest. No more silence. The words cracked through the quarry like a gunshot. The crowd stirred, anger and fear swirling, but Evelyn didn't waver. She had found her breaking point and chosen her side. The truth would come out, whatever it cost. In the days that followed the confrontation at the quarry, Stonebrook could no longer pretend. Evelyn's article went live on the Gazette's front page and was picked up by every major outlet within hours. Her words cut through decades of silence, naming names, revealing the cover-up, and telling the world what had been buried along with that bus. The fallout was immediate. Arrests were made. The librarian, the former mayor, even Tom Reynolds were taken in for questioning. Whispers of a clandestine group, townspeople, who had struck a secret bargain that day in 1978, spread like wildfire. Not all the details were clear, not all the missing accounted for, but the spell of silence was broken. For Evelyn, the cost was heavier than she expected. Her inbox filled with threats, her phone rang with anonymous warnings, and once, someone spray-painted traitor across her front door. Stonebrook was divided. Half the town demanded justice. The other half wanted her gone. Yet, in the middle of the storm, she felt something she hadn't in years. Clarity. Laura was gone again. The night after the quarry, Evelyn had returned, hoping to see her friend, to ask the 1,000 questions that still burned inside her. But Laura had vanished into the shadows once more, leaving only the hair clip behind, resting gently on the edge of Evelyn's car. Hood. Evelyn understood. Laura had given her what she needed, not the comfort of friendship restored, but the courage to stop living in silence. One evening, Evelyn sat on her porch, watching the sun sink behind the trees. The note still folded in her pocket. We never left. For the first time in decades, she felt the ache in her chest ease. Laura was right. They had never left. Their voices had always been here, waiting for someone to listen. Evelyn wasn't naive. She knew the town would carry scars forever, that some truths might never be fully uncovered. But she had told the story. She had dragged the shadows into the light, and in doing so, she had finally set herself free in the end. Evelyn realized the real tragedy wasn't just that a bus disappeared in 1978. It was that an entire town chose silence over truth. For nearly 5 decades, fear had dictated memory, turning victims into whispers and friends into ghosts. But silence is not the same as peace. As she closed her notebook for the night, Evelyn whispered a promise to Laura, wherever she was, "I heard you. And now, so will the world." Because sometimes the bravest act isn't finding the answer. It's refusing to stop asking the question.